the facts of the matter are this. If you want a different version of you, you are going to have to give something up. You are going to have to let a version of you die in order to become the person that you're supposed to become. And that's one of the biggest things that people get stuck with. They get stuck in their mindset. And a lot of people, and I forget the phrase that I learned, but a lot of people hit this almost glass ceiling. And they think this is as good as it gets. And that's what stops a lot of people. Hi all, Micah Smith here. I am back with another episode of Rebuild and Rise. And today it is going to be just me. And what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about my personal story, because I was not always the woman that you see before you. I have had a lot of personal struggles, financial struggles, and I have come out the other side. I truly have rebuilt and risen. And I feel like I have just genuinely barely scratched the surface. And something I've said before, and I'm going to say again, is that you are most qualified to help the person or the people that you used to be. And so that is why I am in the business that I'm in. And so my journey began with me actually really struggling a lot with my own personal credit and my personal finances. And I'll be honest, when I was recruited into this business, I didn't even know it was a thing. I didn't know that you could make a mistake and then potentially have your credit corrected. I didn't know that. And I still remember at the age of, I believe I was 21 years old. So I am a very wild individual. I've always been an adrenaline junkie, to say the least. And I, funny enough, have the same birthday as Evel Knievel. And I've been riding motorcycles since I was 10 years old. And I still remember at the ripe old age of 20, I was living in Colorado, which is where I'm from. And I was very excited to be off on my own. So I had my own apartment, I had my little car, and all of a sudden I saw a motorcycle that was for sale at a dealership. And so I really didn't know what credit was. My dad helped me establish it. I didn't have credit cards. He co-signed for me for my car loan. And so, little old me, I'm going out and I go to this motorcycle dealership and I'm like, I gotta have it. So I'm sitting here, I'm doing the math and I'm like, okay, as long as I am making, X amount of dollars per week, I've got my expenses, I'm locked in, I'm locked and loaded. And so I was working in retail at the time, and just like most people, life happened. And so I was let go from my little retail job, and all of a sudden all these expenses that I had just came crashing down on my head. And so I still remember to this day, when my father co-signed for my loan, he said, don't you dare ever miss a payment. He's like, or you will be in the biggest trouble ever. And now I had a lot of respect and I really revered my father, and I always will. And so that sank in, and I was like, okay, I can never miss a payment. So I made sure that I always made my car payment on time because it was attached to my father's name. And that's a little tidbit, FYI, right? So if you co-sign for somebody, you are 100% responsible for the loan, same as the person, right, on the actual loan itself. So it's going to impact both of you. So if I missed a payment, it would have hurt mine and my dad's credit. And so I was like, there's no way I'm missing a payment. So no matter what, everything went to that car. I never missed a payment. I paid it off in full eventually, after quite a few years. But the whole thing was, right, and this is what we talk about so much in everything that I do, is plan on the plan not going according to plan. And I didn't have that. I didn't have savings. I didn't have money set aside for a rainy day. I didn't have a budget. I didn't understand finances. I certainly didn't understand credit. So I walk out of this motorcycle dealership, and hindsight, I'm looking back at what I had paid for this motorcycle, and it was upwards of 20% on this motorcycle that I had gotten. So not only was the interest out of control, right, but I was now in a place where I couldn't even afford the bare minimum monthly payment. And I think it was less than $100. And so I ended up not being able to pay off my loan. And so my father helped me out quite a bit. So what we did is we sold the motorcycle. And so we took the proceeds from the motorcycle and we paid it off completely. My dad helped me do that, but I had missed quite a few payments in the interim. But he went to the bank and he negotiated everything on my behalf. But I literally had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. And I still remember to this day not really understanding the impact that it was having on my credit score. But I still remember at that moment in time when everything was being taken care of, I just assumed, I was like, cool, well, I will never be able to buy a home. Ever. I mean, that was literally the thought that went through my head. And I had never been taught credit, but I just thought, okay, cool. I'm at least going to have to wait at least 7 years before I'm able to do any sort of like home purchase or anything substantial or real with my life. And it continued on throughout my life, just this pattern of irresponsibility. And unfortunately, even though I went to great schools, colleges, had a good family, nobody ever taught me anything about credit. And it wasn't something I understood. It wasn't something I knew how to correct and didn't even know that you could. And so as I kept going through my 20s and my 30s, it was just silly little choice after silly little choice after silly little choice, and with no real definitive this is where I'm going in my life and here are the choices that I'm going to make. I really didn't know which way to go. And finally, at some point, I ended up opening a credit card. I think my first credit card might have been a Kohl's credit card. I don't even remember why I opened it. I think it was just because I was shopping at Kohl's. They asked if I wanted one. I was like, sure. And I got approved. And I was like, wow, that's weird. And so I used it and used it responsibly, never defaulted, ended up getting another couple credit cards. So I had these credit cards, these little tiny credit cards, and I never really did anything with them, to this extreme magnitude. But I use them probably like most people do, irresponsibly. I didn't know the purpose of them. I didn't really look at them as a tool to build my credit. I looked at them as a means to buy what I wanted when I wanted it, and eventually I would pay it off. And again, I wasn't taught properly. And my parents were very good with money. They always were. But again, they never taught us this stuff. Like we never had debt. My father never had debt. He didn't believe in it. So if we couldn't afford it, we just didn't buy it. But he never actually taught us the principles. And we're very old fashioned the way we grew up. And I think that there was just this assumption that she's never going to make any mistakes. She's never going to do the stupid things that she's going to do. And so, but fast forward to 20s, 30s, and now I'm in my 40s, right? So I made a lot of mistakes in my 20s and 30s. And so when I jumped into this business, I found it so ironic, right? So I was working in lending at the time. And so the recruiter, when they had called me, I really thought that they were out of their minds for wanting to bring me on to work for a credit restoration firm. Because I'm like, first of all, I don't know anything about finances. I don't have a finance background. I didn't get a finance degree. And I certainly don't understand how credit works, how to repair it, how to maximize the credit score. And again, they liked me for my speaking ability. So it was just so interesting to me, this entire subject and topic. And again, very early on, within like the first couple of months of me being in the business of credit, I understood this to me was not just a job. This was a vocation, which if you don't know what that is, it's a calling. And so the company that I worked for a very long time, I ended up staying with them because I loved what I did so much. And I loved the people that I helped so much. It was so much more about the people than it ever was about the income, because I really made very, very little income when I worked for a very large firm. And so it was my absolute passion to be able to serve people in the way that I was able to serve them, and teaching people in a way that they could understand that I knew I would understand. So I wanted to be the person that I needed 15 years ago. And that's why I jumped into this business wholeheartedly. And I was doing one of my trainings with one of my mentors the other night. And so I'm in Arete Syndicate with Ed Milet and Andy Frisella. And Ed Milet had said, when you do what you're called to do, it's not about doing what you're called to do. It's about who you impact in the process. And I just had an amazing podcast with my friend Lindsay Stevens, who her and her husband have Stevens Real Estate. They own Stevens Real Estate, and they're super powerhouses. And you're going to find the most successful people, they find immense value in serving and helping others become the best versions of themselves. And so I want to talk to you about a couple of things that I learned throughout my journey. And so much of it was I needed to make different choices, but I needed to get educated. So that was step number one. So I got the education. And then step number two was I had to apply the education, right? So if you have the education, but you refuse to apply it, that's on you, right? So that's why I teach all over the country. That's why we teach our clients. That's why we try to help them understand how the business works and how credit works and how this process works. So first you get the education and then you apply it. And then as I became better and better at understanding this, then I was able to teach it. The moment you can teach something, you are going to continue to educate yourself, but you're going to learn from your audience. And so being able to teach this at the magnitude that I do has really been so impactful for me because it helps me understand where people's heads are at. And so oftentimes we see so many misconceptions and misnomers around credit and how it works. I mean, you'll hear it all from people say, I got a credit card and I didn't know you ever even had to pay it back. I actually thought it was free money, to, I think that, credit cards are evil. I think that, having credit cards is the stupidest thing you can do, to, hey, I have a $100,000 credit card and I'm over my limit on my credit card, or I built a business and I put it all on my credit cards. Or, there's so many different ideas around money and how people have a relationship with it and what it is that they do with it. And so first things first is you have to have the education around it, the formal education that comes from someone who is an expert. Now, I never consider myself an expert, but I am pretty dang educated in the topic of credit and finance. And so the moment you become a quote unquote expert, right, that's the moment that you stop learning, which is why you're never going to hear me call myself an expert. But you do want to sit with a professional and you want to learn from them the actual facts and the truths as to how to rectify a situation that has gone wrong. And the podcast that I had with my friend Lindsay, right, she's talking about you just have to ask for help. And one of my favorite quotes of all time is that, right, you're only as sick as your secrets. So many people oftentimes wait months, if not years, before they actually become honest with myself or with a friend as to what they're struggling with. And yesterday, when I was at this event, so I went to an event in the city with a real estate firm. And while I was there, they were talking about growth. And they say that you will never outgrow what you're willing to be honest with yourself about. So basically, and this has been true for my life, like to the capacity that you're willing to be honest with yourself is to the capacity to which you're going to grow. And so for me, this resonates so deeply with me because I had to be honest with myself and say, Micah, you are making bad choices and your life is proving to you that you are not in alignment with who you're supposed to be. So you need to start making better choices. So I had to get really honest with myself about my finances. I've spoken multiple times about my drinking, right? I was wild. I was crazy. I had really poor habits and life just kept getting in the way. I kept getting in the way of life is actually a better way to say it. And because I would not change my habits. And so the moment that I got really, really honest with myself, so right, I got the education, I applied it, but then I got really honest and I got really, really deep with myself. And I'm like, okay, so here are the outcomes that you keep having in your life and you're not happy with them. So let's get honest with what can you change, right? So the facts of the matter are this. If you want a different version of you, you are going to have to give something up. You are going to have to let a version of you die in order to become the person that you're supposed to become. And that's one of the biggest things that people get stuck with. They get stuck in their mindset. And a lot of people, and I forget the phrase that I learned, but a lot of people hit this almost glass ceiling and they think, this is as good as it gets. And that's what stops a lot of people. I've heard it explained in a lot of different ways where Some people are going through life and it's called like the elevator, right? The elevator method. So you're going through life and you get to floor 1. Some people want to get off on floor 1, and then you're going through life and then people want to get off on floor 2. And then there's people that want to get off on floor 3 and floor 4 and floor 5, right? So, but some people only believe that floor 1 is all they're capable of getting to. And that's why they stay on floor 1 when they're capable of getting to floor 11. So they may want to get to floor 11, but they think they're only capable of 1. So a lot of people look at life and they're like, this is as good as it's going to get. And there's other people that I've met that are like, they're just waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? So it's like things start going well, and they self-sabotage because they're like, well, my life, like I've always attracted, this, that, and the other into my life. And so, it's only a matter of time before things drop. So you have to have this mindset shift, right? And it is it's something that you have to actively work on every single day. So you have to, again, have the education, you've got to apply it, then you've got to get really honest with yourself as to what's broken, and then you have to take action, and you have to let a little piece of you die in order for the new version of you to be born. And so this is a very natural pruning process. And so you have to look at your life and say, what am I willing to get rid of to become a better version of myself? Let's keep it super simple. I mean, if you are looking to become better off financially, well, then you need to start by setting a budget. And that might mean you need to get rid of excess spending. So like, for instance, I was listening to Candy Valentino this morning, and she does her market minutes. And so she was doing something where she has a month of October where it's like a no spend October. And so this is something that you can just say, hey, for the entire month of October, I am going to eradicate any unnecessary spending. Or you can look at all of your finances, and you can look at all of your expenditures, and you can just simply say, okay, I spent a lot of money on takeout. Well, you know what? Instead of takeout, I'm going to order all of my food. I'm going to go buy groceries, and I'm going to make food every single day, so that way you're being conscientious about putting money away. So now you've taken some money that you would normally spend on excess and you put it away for a rainy day. And that eventually will stockpile and culminate into bigger and bigger things. So habits compound on themselves, whether they're positive or they're negative. And so it's really important that as we're trying to become better versions of ourselves, we just start making better choices little by little by little. And I think one of the best quotes that I ever heard is, how do you eat a whale? And when I heard this, I kind of chuckled. I was like, how do you eat a whale? And they were like, one bite at a time. And I was like, oh, I get it. And that's the thing, is that a lot of times when we think about these big things that we're trying to accomplish, we get overwhelmed because we're thinking about the wrong thing. We're thinking about the end result versus the little tiny baby steps that it takes to get there. And that's what it requires, is it just takes these tiny little baby steps. And what happens is that, right, over a year's time, right, you become this different version of yourself. And so they say it, and they've quantified it before. 1% better every day becomes 37% better in a year. So if you can just focus on 1% better every single day, then that becomes 37% better at the end of the year. And those habits will continue to compound. I mean, this is really, when we're talking about finances and building wealth, and I think my friend Lindsay put it perfectly in the podcast that we had, it was that when she's trying to help people on her team sell more real estate, she coaches them to become better versions of themselves. What's holding you back from becoming a better version of yourself? And she calls it a trauma dump. And it's all the little things that you may not even think of that are impacting you, but they actually are. So like someone on her team, she had never met her birth parents. And so she helped her team member go and meet her birth parents. You just never know what is holding you back. And so you really have to, again, you've got to reflect, you've got to get honest with yourself, and you have to eradicate these things that are keeping you stuck. And I really learned a very interesting word yesterday. And you're going to have to go in and probably find the actual definition of it, but I'm going to sum it up. And it's called anti-fragility. And when I learned this yesterday, basically we were talking about resilience and how resilience equals adaptability. And then we learned anti-fragility. And anti-fragility is basically being able to use the things that have gone badly in your life to help you become a better version of you. And I have the belief, and I will always have the belief, that things don't happen to you, they happen for you. I also believe that the world is rigged in my favor. I also believe that I am the luckiest person that I know. And I have one of the single-handedly most blessed lives of anyone that you'll ever meet. And it's not because I have all this stuff, and it's not because of any other thing except for I choose to say I have the most blessed life ever. And I look at life through a very different and unique lens. And it's something where I had to train myself to be that person. And I still remember there was a time in my life where I was dating the wrong person. I was living the wrong way. I was drinking, pretty much every day. And I was just living a life that I knew that was not meant for me. And I still remember sitting in this ugly apartment with disgusting furniture with a guy that I could not stand, that I knew was wrong for me. And I still remember looking up saying, this is not my life. And fast forward to where I am now, I designed a life that I was excited to wake up to because I'm in alignment with my purpose. And deep down, we all know that we're capable of so much more. And it is up to us individually to essentially decide, what do I want to do differently today than I did yesterday? And it's just those tiny, tiny, tiny little decisions. And David Brooks, he writes a beautiful book, and it's called The Road to Character. And he talks about where character comes from. And it comes from overcoming little obstacles every single day that we encounter every single day. And that's the road to character. So character and self-confidence, it's going to come from making right decision after right decision after right decision after right decision. Versus if you lived a life that I had lived for a very long time, actively stuck in addiction, abusive relationships, right? Just a very, very not in alignment again with who I was created to be. A little piece of me would die every time I would pick up a drink. Every single time, because I knew that I was choosing a path not meant for me long term. So with that being said, I just want to make sure that you all understand that I was not always the person that you see before you. I am someone who in my 20s had a 500 credit score, and late 20s, probably high fives, and then early 30s, low sixes. And now that I'm in my 40s, right, I'm in the mid 800s, right? Almost perfect, not quite. And I'm qualified to talk to you about this life. I have savings, I have investment accounts, my husband and I have property. We don't have any debt. And I'm qualified to talk to you about these things because I had to learn the principles as to how to become this individual. I had to take the steps. I had to take the action steps in order to become the person that I am today. And so what I implore you to do is to take these actionable steps that I just gave you in order for you to meet the other version of you. Because there is another version of you that is essentially waiting to come out. And I would love for you to meet them. Because me, having met this other person, I now realize my capacity is even bigger. And I realize that I'm going to be able to help even more people. Because the better I do, the more people, like the more right people that I attract. And the more that I attract the right people, the more they pour into me, the more I'm able to pour into other people. And it's this amazing effect. And it just goes round and round and round of just being able to give back in such an extraordinary way. You cannot give back to society if you can't even help yourself. Life is about contribution. And if you can't live a life of contribution because you're not even helping yourself, then you're going to have a really hard time finding fulfillment while you're here. So I would implore you today to get really honest with yourself so that way you can push through whatever it is that you're going through, right? Resilience is critical. Resilience is adaptability. They're two of the same, right? I learned this yesterday. And resilience, and I'm finding a lot of people lack resilience, right? They get stuck in this woe is me, woe is me. Well, I'm going to tell you something. Wake up. Stop it. Stop it. Like, just stop it. I literally have had to tell myself that in my life. Stuff that was keeping me stuck. I literally said, Micah, stop stop it. And I did. Because you know what? I am not a victim. I refuse to be a victim. And I hope that you people watching and listening, I hope that you take this message to heart and you stop acting like a victim. No one is stopping you except for you. You are your own worst enemy. So when you decide one day I am sick and tired of being sick and tired, then go make a different choice. You have the ability to make changes anywhere in your life. And it starts here. This is number one. You have to flex this every single day. Guys, I just want to inspire you, and I hope that you aspire, right, to be able to live a life that is unique, that is something to be modeled for. Like, what is your legacy going to be when you leave here? And these are things that we need to be thinking about, right? What is the legacy that you want to leave behind, right? So, and it's the everyday choices. Every time that you interact with someone, you're impacting them, whether you like it or not. You might be impacting them in a way that you don't realize. You might be teaching someone who they don't want to be. You know how many people I meet every single day where I'm like, I'm so glad I met that person because that's a good reminder of who I don't want to be. And then I meet people and I interact with people and I'm like, wow, I want to be more like them. I aspire to be like that. Wow, they help a lot of people. How do I do it on a bigger level, a bigger scale? What impact are you making? Because I want you to know somebody is always watching. And if you're not concerned with who's watching you, well, I want you to understand something. Look in the mirror, because that's the person you're going to impact the most. All right, guys, that is the end of my podcast today. I hope that you enjoyed this show. And if it inspired you in any way, please do share this with someone that you think it would inspire as well. I am Micah Smith, the host of Rebuild and Rise. God bless.